special episode of The Echo, a Green Lantern Vidcast/podcast. I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, the Emerald enthusiast himself, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
What's up, Lantern fans? It's the podcasting machine, the big nerd in green, the man who spends lots of green paper on the green light. It's the Emerald enthusiast.
Yeah, your ratio of giving up green to get green is probably quite disproportionate on the giving up green side of the equation. But this is a special episode. I think I mentioned that. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's a special episode is because we weren't planning to do a Green Lantern-centric episode today. But yesterday, as of this recording, the fine folks at Warner Media and HBO Max decided to grace Green Lantern fandom with an announcement. And that announcement is that we have our first actor cast for the HBO Max Green Lantern live-action series. Donnie, we knew this day would eventually come, and we made a pact off-air that if it did, we'd push whatever we were doing to the side to record a special episode, and we're fulfilling that promise. So we're men of our words. So the actor in question is Finn Witrock, and he will be portraying Guy Gardner. So,
yes.
Donnie, I have absolutely zero familiarity with Mr. Witrock. Have you seen him in either American Horror Story or Ratchet, I think it is?
Yes, I've only seen one episode of Ratchet that you're talking about. I have seen two different seasons of American Horror Story in which he has appeared. I do like him. Again, I would say that the roles that he was on there are much different than Guy Gardner. Right. But he does have a certain gravitas, a certain intimidation to the roles that he can play. He can definitely be a believable soldier type of character. There's no doubt in my mind. 36 years old from Massachusetts, and I think that this is a good casting. They're definitely not looking for him to be too young. At the same time, they haven't cast somebody who's really old, who might be limited in the physicality of the role. I think they found the perfect window here.
Yeah, it's not Ezra Miller, but it's not Ben Affleck. The age range is ready, smack dab in the sweet spot kind of thing. So I mean, look, all I've seen is a picture of him. From his face structure, I could see Guy Gardner there. Mm-hmm. Yes, I know he's got dark hair, but let's remember that there are things called hair dye and wigs. And either of those could give us the Guy Gardner, reddish hair. So that is not concerning me.
No.
I've seen a lot of people say he's too skinny or thin for the part. Again, working out, there's this thing called the gym.
Right.
You go to it and there are weights that if you lift and repeatedly lift them over the course of time, your muscles start to build, your mass starts to build. And so, again, all these things are controllable, and I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about the fact that I think the priority of these productions is to get the best actor for the role. When you're testing, when you're doing the screen test, the best actor that wins the role should be the one that gets the role. That should be the main criteria.
Yeah.
Everything else can come afterwards. And judging by what you've told me, what Steven's told me, it seems like they've made a good choice here. I'm just going to look up because
Yeah, I saw him on the Roanoke season of American Horror Story is what I remember him from in particular,
he wrote something on Instagram.
Okay.
So I'm just going to find it.
Okay, you go ahead and find that. Another thing I want to throw out there, as far as his body type, and again, I've never seen him in anything other than costume, so I don't exactly know what he looks like when it comes to that. Guy Gardner is somebody who his Green Lantern uniform has traditionally always been a vest that kind of buttons in front. So
Right.
I don't know how much of his physique we're going to see anyway. So
yeah, he doesn't have to be Hulk Hogan.
yeah, this is not like, we're casting, Prince Namor or somebody like that who's going to be, a lot of his body's going to be shown. I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah,
So.
we're not talking about, He-Man. We're talking
Right.
about Guy Gardner.
Yeah.
Big difference. So it says here, he wrote on his Instagram, accompanied with the article of this, casting. Beyond excited to join the Green Lantern universe as Guy Gardner, coming to HBO Max in the not too distant future. Short but sweet. And interesting, one of the articles that I read, by the way, this has been confirmed all over Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, the major trades. DC's put out a press release.
Yes.
So it's legit as legit can be.
Yes.
And I can't remember if it was the Hollywood Reporter or Variety, but one of those two stated that they are very close to finalizing a deal for the actor that they want for Alan Scott.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say which actor, but they expect that announcement to be coming fairly soon.
Mm-hmm.
So things are moving. Donnie, I know a lot of people were concerned because we hadn't heard anything, and they were wondering, is this project still happening? Clearly it is. I know the original intent, there was a rumor that it was supposed to start filming April 12th. Obviously that didn't happen. But again, it makes sense because they're finalizing their cast. You have to have a cast before you can shoot. I mean, technically you could film second unit stuff. You don't need, exterior shots and the like. You don't need a cast for that. But to start shooting in earnest, you need a cast. So it makes sense that the April 12th date didn't happen. I'm hearing at some point in September is their targeted start date. So they have plenty of time to finalize their cast. And I have no doubt that they will do that before their scheduled start date. So things are moving. That's the important thing. Looks like they got a quality actor to start us off. And
I realize that a lot of Green Lantern fans are gun shy because we have been promised so much in the last 10 years and things never seem to work out. But I think this time, even though this development may be a little slower than we would like, it is happening. We will see this materialize.
Once they start casting, it would take a calamity for the project not to happen. Like I'm talking Justice League Mortal, Superman Lives type of scenario. But again, DC's under new management now, and this fear of... I understand as a DC fan, we're kind of, afraid that I need to see it filming to believe it is our mantra kind of thing, right? But
sure,
you got to understand, DC is under new management now, and I got to give props where they're due. Ever since Walter Hamada has come on board, everything that he said was going into production has gone into production, including The Flash, which took how many directors, how many writers, and just yesterday, as of this recording, I saw the first set picture of Michael Keaton's Wayne Manor, and never did I think I could get so excited by a manor, but here we are. I was hyperventilating, and I was so happy. I was like, wait, should I go to the hospital? Because I'm not sure about this hyperventilation. But then I realized, I'm looking at Wayne Manor, so I'm okay. Right. Got to give him props, because everything he said was going to go in production under his watch, so far, has done so.
And definitely, The Flash was definitely in flux. The movie, I mean, for how long? I mean, we heard rumor after rumor, and there seemed to be reboot after reset as far as the production goes. And now it seems like they're finally on the road to actually getting that out.
They're in production. Yeah, they're filming.
Yeah,
cameras are rolling. So and so you got to give them credit. So I think we can start. I mean, obviously, it depends on when you look at the project. It depends on what it is. Like when they announced New Gods up, I mean, that was a stretch. I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, we'll see. But like I said, you can tell when Warner Media has a real interest in developing a character for film or television, and you could tell right off the hop from the Green Lantern announcement that the people they were putting in place were people that have gotten things off the ground for them before. Berlanti, Guggenheim, and also the amount of money that they were putting into this. For season 1 has $100 million budget.
Yes.
So they're putting big money behind this. So they're serious. And so when you see that kind of commitment right off the hop, it's okay to get excited. Yeah. It may not happen news may not come as fast as we want it to, but again, just because we don't hear anything publicly, it doesn't mean things aren't happening behind the scenes. And that's what I think we as fans are going to train ourselves to understand, is that,
especially in the pandemic era. That's why so many things are coming along much more slowly than they usually would.
But quality is the most important thing. So, sure, they could rush something out and it could be a pile of garbage, and nobody wants that. So, yeah.
And another thing that I do want to say here, not everybody, I'm sure, looks for news as much as, Adam and I do. Yeah. A lot of people are asking, where's Jon Stewart? Where's Hal Jordan? Well, from the start, they said that the characters that headline this show, and again, the Green Lantern Corps consists of a lot of different characters. They would not be Hal Jordan or Jon Stewart.
Yeah.
Those were off the table. Those are going to be movie properties as far as we know.
Yeah. So, again, and here's I want to caution, because it's, folks, and I know some people aren't hunting for news like we are, like you said.
Sure.
But before you post a hot take on Twitter, or look how smart I sound, or how look, I know my stuff. I know how Before you make a tweet that's going to come off like either of that, why don't you read an article and inform yourself before you do that? Again, I'm not trying to slag on anybody, but when an animator that's worked on Young Justice comes on and says, "Well, I'm shocked that they're not. Why aren't they using Jon Stewart? So many kids have grown up with Jon Stewart." They have, but this show from the outset has said, like Warner Media has said, they're using Hal and John for the movie. Like they've come out, it's the reason why Jon Stewart wasn't in Zack Snyder's Justice League, because Warner Media has plans for him. And I totally understand. As cool as it would have been to see that actor, because we're seeing some, behind the scenes from Zack's driveway come out in the pajamas, the whole 9 yards. The CGI pajamas. As cool as it would have been to see Jon Stewart, I'm kind of happy we didn't see him in Zack Snyder's Justice League, because that is clearly sounding like a one and done scenario, and I don't want that for Jon Stewart. Like when I finally see him in live action, I want the possibility of him continuing on.
Sure.
So, yes.
Well, and that's why when people have asked me about it, yes, I did want to see it, but Green Lantern should have been there all along. So just because I don't get that one scene, had I gotten it, yes, it would have been a little bit better.
Yeah, but Donnie, had you gotten it and now they said, okay, Zack Snyder's Justice League is just a one-time thing, wouldn't that have aggravated you more?
I mean, this whole scenario of Green Lantern not being one of the most important parts of the Justice League, that in and of itself has always sat wrong with me.
Yeah. So to me, and nobody take this the wrong way, because I'm not meaning it to be the wrong way. I would have subbed Jon Stewart for Cyborg if I was in charge of making a Justice League movie. Mm-hmm. Jon Stewart would have been there. Cyborg would not have.
Okay.
I'm not the director. I wasn't in charge. Warner Media didn't ask me for my opinion. they made the movie. To varying different degrees, I enjoyed both attempts. I know somewhere down the road, I'm going to see Jon Stewart in live action. I'm going to see, Guy, Jessica, Alan in the show. And eventually I'm going to see another version of the Justice League. And hopefully it has a lineup that I'm 100% on board with. If some characters are there that I'm not 100% on, or I don't think should be there, at that point, I'll just hope they tell me a good story and that I enjoy it.
Sure.
And know that eventually we'll get another reboot and I'll eventually see the full complement of it. Like, it's bound to happen. Either I'll see the team I want, my nephews will see the team I want, maybe my grandkids down the road will see the team. Somebody will see the team I want. So, again, I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to get frustrated. Things take time. There are different avenues of this entertainment. We're getting Green Lantern on HBO Max. They're planning to give us Green Lantern on film as well. Judging from Warner Media's new strategy, it's going to be a film project is going to have an accompanying HBO Max project, ideally, and vice versa. So I wouldn't rule the idea out that the Green Lantern show we see on HBO Max will eventually have ties to the film. That's my theory.
Sure.
But Donnie, since we have a Guy Gardner now cast, for people not as familiar with Guy Gardner, why don't you give us some recommendations of stories that you think people should read to familiarize themselves?
Yeah, well, I can do that. And that actually, I want to close the Jon Stewart portion before we get to that by saying something that will lead us into the Guy Gardner thing. I saw a lot of tweets where people are just like, where's Jon Stewart? This Green Lantern show, where's Jon Stewart? Where's Jon Stewart? I'm going to help you out in case you haven't seen my Twitter. What you do, go out of your front door, be safe, of course, wear your mask, go down to this thing called the comic book shop.
What are those, Donnie?
Believe it or not, there's a form of media where you actually read words with pictures. And there's a new series by Jeffrey Thorne.
You mean this? Oh, you can't see it, damn it. Damn it, it doesn't work with the background. Anyway, I'm holding up a comic book.
Believe it or not, Jon Stewart, a brand new series called The Green Lantern, headlined by Jon Stewart, written by Jeffrey Thorne, a Jon Stewart enthusiast, is at your local comic shop. If you like Jon Stewart, go down and buy the comic book, and you will see some new Jon Stewart material.
Donnie, I almost fell out of my chair here because of this shocking information. I never knew about these things called comic books. Wow. And listen, if you don't know where a comic book store in your area is, there's this great thing, it's called the Comixology. And if you go on there, you can download a comic book for $3.99.
Yes.
And there are plenty of Jon Stewart stories there.
Plenty of them.
It's fantastic.
There's also a Jon Stewart 50th anniversary edition coming out this year.
Exactly. And if all of that fails, while you're waiting for the movie, Jon Stewart was, I think, in 5 seasons of a Justice League animated series?
Mm-hmm.
You can always go back and watch that, too.
You can always go back and watch that.
A lot of options.
And if you want to hear about Jon Stewart's origin, we covered that on the Emerald Echo podcast, available on iTunes and Podbean.
Yeah. So, by all means, go listen to that, too. And while you're at it, buy the Todd McFarlane Jon Stewart figure, which I have bought. But it's awaiting arrival because, God forbid, they ship things at the same time in Canada that they do in the States.
Got 2 of them right back there.
Yeah, well.
Waiting a review.
I thought you were waiting for me to come steal one so then I could cancel my order and not have to worry about this delay. But yeah, I digress. My thievery will have to wait. So yeah, Jon Stewart in time, we'll get there.
Yeah. In
the meantime, we have Guy Gardner. So if you want to read about Guy Gardner, when the show starts, you're like, I'm familiar with this dude. Which story should they read?
Well, let me talk a little bit about, we're going to have this combined with part of another podcast.
Yeah.
His first appearance was Green Lantern Volume 2, number 59. Now, that is essentially a dream sequence story. The Guy Gardner that most people know, the kind of, uber masculine, somewhat sexist, always looking for a brawl type of character, that came along more at Green Lantern Volume 2, number 194, running through roughly issue 200. That was Joe Staton and Steve Englehart reimagining the character with the vest and a more aggressive attitude. In this like arc here, he battles several times with John Stewart. He actually tries to kill Hal Jordan, and he is a very different character than the kind of social worker that we're introduced to originally. He was very much a background character, and he only had a few appearances over his first few years.
He's like the way you described him sounds like the Roddy Piper of Green Lantern.
Well, there was, I forget which one it was. I drew a parallel to Guy Gardner and Sawyer from Lost. When we're first introduced, we were first introduced to Sawyer. He is a very unlikable character, seemingly. Eventually, his heart comes out, and you see that he's someone, going on this journey of self-exploration.
Yeah.
Guy is actually, the reason why Guy acts the way he does for the longest time is because he was actually brain damaged in the Phantom Zone. He underwent some kind of brain injury, and it changed his personality. When he comes back in the latter stages of Volume 2 of Green Lantern, his personality has changed. He's very aggressive, and that's the story that I'm talking about here. Now, later on, but not too much later, in the early 90s, Guy actually had his own series. It's just called Guy Gardner. Now, he's not a Green Lantern in this series. This is actually being deep dived on the podcast of Oa, but he had his own series. This is pre-Emerald Twilight. And
you mean the podcast of Oakland? They're good friends over there. The podcast of guys, the reason why I bring that up is just a quick aside. Yesterday, I was tweeting back and forth with Phil Bova and Myron, and I mentioned how I was excited to cover the Green Lantern show with Donnie when it arrives, and I tossed out the idea maybe we could do a couple of crossovers with the podcast with the blog of Oa, and my stupid phone auto-corrected Oa, the blog of Oa, with the blog of Oakland. and so I maintain that these phones, damn it, you see this phone here? Yeah. It might have disappeared because of the background. But anyway, these phones that are called smartphones, if you don't know what Oa is, you ain't that smart. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Dummy. Anyway, the phone, not me. Continue, Donnie.
Continue. As far as another recommendation that I have here, Green Lantern Rebirth. Now, not the company-wide Rebirth. I'm talking about the 2005 story.
Yeah.
It centers around Hal Jordan, but at the same time, this is where Guy morphs from Guy Gardner Warrior back into Guy Gardner, member of the Green Lantern Corps.
Yeah.
And that's where he's kind of been ever since. I mean, this is kind of the modern Guy Gardner
starting. I prefer him as a Green Lantern than as the Warrior persona.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Warrior persona.
I do like the W because it reminds me of Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, I like that, but again, I like him coming back to the core. Another story that I really liked. It's called The Dark Side of Green. It's from the Green Lantern Corps book, and this was, I believe, the trade paperback was published in 2007, and it has Guy going in deep cover with an offshoot, a secretive offshoot of the Green Lantern Corps called the Green Lantern Corps. And you see Guy kind of relying on his stealth and his intelligence, as well as he's paired up with another Green Lantern, Raimi Hull, who's not a huge character name, but I like the interactions there because he was not only giving her some training, he was being a little sexist with her. So there were she kind of calls him on it, and there was some funny exchanges.
I wonder if that's gonna play out with his, because he's partnered up with that Bree Jarda character.
Yeah, right? The original character. I would say we would see some. I don't expect the kind of unfettered misogyny that we sometimes saw in the 1980s with Guy. I expect it to be a little bit more muted, but I expect it to be.
I don't think they'll go that far because nowadays you get in trouble for that.
Yeah, so those are 4 good recommendations for Guy. I also want to mention one that's very recent. Green Lantern Future State. There is a story in there that's basically one possible future for Guy. This is not an action-packed story, and I don't want to spoil it for you as to, unless you've watched our other podcast, because we have talked about this.
Yeah.
This shows Guy Gardner's heart. He acts in somewhat of a diplomatic capacity here.
Yeah, yeah.
So Green Lantern Future State, you pick up the one that has Guy Gardner in it. That story is very interesting to show you the kind of heart that Guy has, and really probably the thing that really got him the Green Lantern ring. Why he was, this is expounding on why, he was going to originally be the backup for Hal Jordan. And of course, he was in a bus accident, and we will get into that. But why he was, even though he was a gym teacher, he, the thing that caused him to be selected by the ring, or he would have been selected had it not gone to Hal Jordan because he was closer.
Yeah.
So.
And do I remember correctly, Donnie? Did Steven say Guy Gardner was his favorite Green Lantern?
I do believe he said that. Yeah.
All right.
Guy has made some animated appearances too. Not only was he on the Green Lantern series, he was on. It was one of the Batman cartoons.
Probably Brave and the Bold.
I think it was Brave and the Bold. Yes.
Yeah. If I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of what you should read regarding Guy Gardner, and as a special treat for the YouTube viewers, we way back when did a spotlight episode of the audio podcast on Guy Gardner. So we're going to present that conversation as part of this vidcast. So now it'll transition. You won't see our faces anymore, but you'll hear us talk about the early appearance of Guy Gardner. We hope you enjoy that, and we'll see you next time.
We will be back in brightest day and blackest night. No Green Lantern news shall escape our sight.
From the first bit of casting to the last. Enjoy, everybody.
See you, everybody. Right, so then let's fast forward to 1968 in Green Lantern number 59, which is the first appearance of Guy Gardner. And it opens with a story called Earth's Other Green Lantern. And on the planet Oa, the Guardians show Hal Jordan a device called the Memory Machine. And it records all the memories of the Green Lanterns for historical preservation, which I really like that, again, you get this idea of the rings transmitting information that can be used later on, hopefully for good purposes and not nefarious ones.
Yeah.
But they show the final moments of Abinsur's life, and they explained how the ring chose Hal. But we also see that there was another successor who was just as qualified as Hal, and Hal got chosen because he was closer.
So it all boils down to geography.
Right. Now, Hal's not offended, and that's good, but they explained to Hal that this person is just as fearless and worthy as he is, and the ring almost went to him. So intrigued by this, Hal is shown an alternate timeline by this machine.
Right.
And viewing the situation, we see that this person is a phys ed teacher from East City named Guy Gardner. Gardner is selected to be the Green Lantern for Earth in this timeline, much like Hal. And we see that he busts up a ring of spies. He takes down a lot of usual Green Lantern villains like Black Hand and Sonar, Dr. Polaris, the Shark, and Sinestro. And later on, there's a mission where he goes to this planet and they're infected by a yellow plague, and it's killed off all the adults on the planet.
Right.
And the surviving children are divided into 2 factions, and they've gone to war with one another with these giant robots. So at first, Guy is used as a pawn, but he manages to free himself and stop this ongoing struggle and convince the children to live in peace. So he returns to Earth, but he eventually himself succumbs to the yellow plague. And at that point, the ring would then choose Hal Jordan as Green Lantern.
Right. A couple of things I enjoyed about this. I really like this idea of like a sort of an alternate, a what if, to borrow a Marvel phrase, kind of story, right? And the details. So like he has a different oath in
Yes.
this continuity, if you will, than the regular Green Lantern oath. I found Guy to be less of a how can I say this politely? Because in modern times he's a bit of a jerk, or
Jerk, yes.
a
Yeah, you
smart
don't get
ass, if you will.
yeah, you
Yeah.
don't get those in these early stories. You
No,
don't
so
see that.
it was a
Yeah.
little bit jarring because I was expecting that. And I'm not one that I don't hate Guy at all. I kind of enjoy that he's a bit of a smart ass. I mean, it differentiates him from everybody. I mean, from all the other lanterns. Like yes, Hal can have a cocky side, but it's different than Guy being a smart ass, and is different than the more militaristic and leadership quality of John Stewart, which is different than the artistic Kyle Rayner, and so on and so forth. So that character trait adds a lot to Guy, and I think having it missing there and not evident at all, it was very jarring for me. But I like that they didn't, try and make Guy any less formidable as a Green Lantern, just so that they could, prop up Hal.
Right. And one of the things you see him do in this issue is make armor for himself when he's on that planet, in the midst of that battle, which I thought was visually very pleasing. And I like when Green Lanterns do things other than, just, shoot the beams and make those kind of weapons when they make really intricate things like that. I've always found that interesting.
Yeah, it's very, it's showing his cleverness. And again, I like the fact that his skills as a school teacher came in handy because he's able to
Relate to those children, yes.
Convince the kids to straighten themselves out and get along. So I like that, just as Hal's experience as an airman bailed him out of some early jams, so too is Guy's here. I mean, in this what if scenario, that suit of armor would have been better if it was some sort of mask or something to protect him from the was the yellow plague, was it called?
Yeah, it was called the Yellow Plague, and he did not social distance in this story.
Well, I mean, see,
let that be a lesson to you, people.
Right.
Social distancing.
And think about how, if we would have seen something like that, how coincidentally, how poignant it would have been had he had something like that on him or whatnot, right, to protect himself. But it would have just been really eerie at the same time. But at the end of the day, I like how I guess because I don't necessarily think they had thought of the successorship just yet, and so at the end of the day, even in the altered continuity, Hal still becomes Green Lantern.
Indeed.
So it's kind of like Hal says he was destined to become a Green Lantern, but this was a strong origin tale for Guy Gardner, even though it was a what if scenario.
Yeah, and you mentioned the oath that he used. I wrote that down, and I would like to recite that for you now.
All right,
because I like on worlds afar or scenes at home, wherever the calls should make me roam. Always I vow to fight the good fight, to combat evil with all Green Lantern's might. That's interesting that he had his own oath.
I mean, there's a little bit of his attitude in. He didn't tell me anything, so I'm going to create my own. I'm good enough.
Right? Yeah, I liked it,
and the fact that it worked.
Yeah, well, we have seen over the years that different Green Lanterns use different oaths. Like a Rotlop fan, he actually doesn't know what green is because he's from a sector with no light, so he's blind, and so he calls the Green Lantern Corps the F-sharp Bell Corps because he only knows sound. Yeah. So we do see that the recharging process, the oath, can vary from lantern to lantern.
But I like that in this story, the ring and the lantern were like, yeah, I dig that. I'll work with that. I'll roll with it.
Yeah. So at the end of this, we see that Hal takes a business trip to East City to meet the real Guy Gardner, and the two become friends. Again, you talk about the antagonistic relationship that we're used to in modern times. That's not present here. But what is interesting is the cover of issue 59 is almost prophetic because he does seem to be a jerk on the cover. He's standing over Hal and he's like, "There's only room for one Green Lantern on Earth, Hal Jordan."
Yeah,
and,
it's
so
which is why I was expecting it, because it's right on the cover. It's like, all right, yeah, we're definitely in Guy territory here.
Yes. So what would you give that issue?
I would say a solid 8.5 out of 10.
Likewise, I would say, around 8.5 or 9. I would have liked to seen a little bit more on the planet where he was, fighting the yellow plague and the robots. That could have been extended a little bit more, but not much criticism other than that.
For me, it would have been a little bit higher if it had been an actual, event that happened instead of an alternate peek into what could have been. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It would have been slightly higher, but yeah, I still a really good issue.
Right. So I do need to make a point here that issue number 76 in volume 2, that's when Green Lantern became Green Lantern / Green Arrow. Right. And that confuses people a little bit. That actually they did that in volume 3 as well. So that was issue 76. So issue number 87, which is a very famous issue in 1971. That's the first appearance of John Stewart. And we get a story called Beware My Power, which continues Guy Gardner's tale. And so you make the point earlier that, Guy, he didn't really seem to be at first a character that was going to be a major player because his appearances are so kind of spaced out when you look at the issue numbers and the first 3 appearances.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. The majority of the issue is very much a John Stewart centric one. The real key to take away here in terms of a Guy Gardner aspect is, he was injured, and Hal's like, well, that's no good. I mean, he's my successor or my replacement. So at some point along the way, now you can tell me if there's a specific issue or if it happened off panel or off page. At some point along the way, they must have told Guy the whole Green Lantern mythos story and asked him if he wanted to be a reserve, because Hal's like, I need to find another replacement. So clearly, Guy must know what's up at that point.
Right. Well, you do see in his third appearance that that he knows that he was the backup. Right. That's from issue number 116. But what we see here is that Guy is actually there. There's an earthquake in Coast City, and Guy is there, and there's a little girl who's on the edge of this road, and you see that the earthquake has opened up part of this road, and she's ready to fall. And she's frightened, and Guy tries to go out there and get her. So again, very, very heroic. I really liked that scene. The art was amazing there. Yeah. And in doing so, Guy's hit by a bus. Right. And I don't mean that figuratively. I mean, he's walloped by a bus in the back.
And just to make to echo your point, I love that he did something heroic without the ring.
That proved his worthiness there. You can see why a ring. You can look at him and say, and I understand this criticism of the character. People say, why in the world, with all the soldiers and firefighters and policemen in the world, would they choose a phys ed teacher? Well, we see that here, that Guy's pretty special. That's why, he may not have some of the training that some of those other professions do, but he has the bravery.
Right. And listen, teachers today, especially in today's day and age, the kids that they have to deal with, some of them, I mean, good. I respect those people immensely.
Yeah.
Because, geez. I wish they were. They probably wish they were Green Lanterns and could create a construct to remove the attitude from some of these kids. Like, what the?
Yeah. My mother's a retired school teacher, and I don't know how she did it for 30 plus years. And I actually did substitute teach one day, and there's a reason it was just one day. I was like, oh my gosh, how did my mother do this?
I'm done. Yeah. Look, I'm the beauty of my situation right now is I'm just an uncle. So I have the fortune of seeing my nieces and nephews, being the cool, the fun uncle, and watching shows and movies and playing video games with them. And then at a certain time, their parents come and pick them up, and my job is over. So I'm like the reserve Green Lantern. I'm like Guy Gardner before he gets drafted full time. I'm like good. I have my moment, and then the parents go home and deal with all the other crap that comes afterwards. But yeah, I don't know how I got a lot of respect for what the teachers have to put up with, and how they deal with some of this. Like I said, it seems that the attitudes are only getting worse. So imagine.
Well, back to the story, we see that Guy, obviously you get hit by a bus, you're going to be hurt. And he describes it as worse. Yeah. He describes it as his body feels like a balloon that a lot of busted light bulbs are rattling around inside of it. And the doctors, you see Hal go to the hospital, and the doctors say he's bedridden for 6 months. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a little optimistic. I'm like, I think 6 months sounds like it's kind of on the lean side there.
Yeah, for sure.
But going back to what you say, Hal worries that with Guy out of commission, there's no alternate GL if something happens to him. And so we get, one of the Guardians appears via an image and states that there has to be an alternate replacement selected. And of course, that would be John Stewart.
Yeah. And I think we're going to leave the rest of the issue for our John Stewart episode.
Yeah, definitely. Because, there's so much to say about John Stewart. We can skip on to issue number, well, you want to rate that? It's not a huge story.
It's kind of hard to rate just a part of it. So I'll save the rating for that issue when we do John. How about that?
Yeah, it's a good one. And if you're a Green Lantern fan at all, if you know the mythos at all, you know that issue very well. So
yeah, it's a must read. I will say that.
So we jump to issue number 116 to a story called My Ring, My Enemy. And Green Lantern and Green Arrow, and of course I mean Oliver Queen, are fighting the mysterious Professor Ojo of the League of Assassins. And Ojo, he's constructed this gigantic eye robot that's hovering over Star City, and he's attacking Green Lantern and Green Arrow. And Green Lantern's ring isn't working properly. So he's forced to travel to Oa and have it repaired by the Guardians of the Universe. And meanwhile, Guy just kind of shows up and says, "Oh, by the way, I'm healed and I'm the replacement."
Yeah, it's like a sci-fi version of a tag out in a tag team match.
And I'm like, okay, well, that must have been some just magnificent physical therapy. If in 6 months you overcame getting hit by a bus, so maybe that's a little bit of you've got to mark out for that story to say, hey, they want a Guy back in it, and maybe that's a little overly convenient there. So the Guardians explain to Hal that his power battery is fundamentally flawed and has to be replaced before it malfunctions dangerously and someone's hurt. And so they give him a new one and tell him to safely dispose of the old one. Now, back on Earth, Guy's victorious, and he goes back home to recharge with the broken battery. And before Hal can get there to warn him, there's an explosion with the flawed battery, and Guy seemingly vanishes. And we find out later on he actually ends up in the Phantom Zone. But those are Guy's first 3 appearances.
It's funny. What's that?
Not huge, but important.
Yeah, no, I really liked the. First of all, the giant eye felt like something that we could probably see Grant Morrison revisit.
Oh, and Liam Sharp drawing that would be awesome.
Yeah. Second of all, League of Assassins. It reminded me of when I read it. Batman Begins. League of Shadows, the whole 9 yards. So
Yes.
that was a good callback for me. But I really liked the banter between Oliver Queen and Guy Gardner, because they both have a bit of an attitude.
Yes.
And watching that in the field anyway, bounce off each other was kind of impressive. But also cool was that they make no illusions to the fact that Guy is new to the whole thing, and that it doesn't go smoothly for him the first time around. Like, he's got to go at the villain again.
Yes.
So
And now later on, Guy, he does get his own series later on, and this is something we may talk about on a later podcast.
Oh, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, he becomes the warrior. And of course he has all different powers at that point. And he and John would co-headline a Green Lantern book later on. And he also made an appearance on a couple of the episodes of Green Lantern, the animated series. And he was absolutely hilarious on those.
Oh, agreed, 100%. And we'll touch on all those, but it's later down the line. No, it's like I said, I gain, such an, again, you were saying, the brief appearances and sort of the frequency is very, sporadic.
Yeah, spaced out. Yes.
But when he does come to play, something big is either happening to him or is the result of his appearance. So it's and like you said, like the whole thing at the end about how he disappears and how that was sort of foretold, right? And so.
Yes, and he does keep making appearances, of course, over the years. And the thing that I admire about this is when you read the more modern comics where they are telling their stories based upon what has come before. These stories at this point, they're building that universe, and to see the Green Lantern mythos built block by block, it's just an amazing experience. It's, like I said, time travel.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. If you're a comic book fan, you've got to go back and read these key issues because you will inevitably enjoy it.
Like I said, I loved it. I love seeing some familiar things, but also how they came to be and stuff like that is really impressive. So I enjoy these, at least at the early stage of our podcast. These look backs to the formation of what I'm used to reading. So it's a really good experience. It has been so far, and I'm sure it'll continue. But and plus, I enjoy Green Arrow as well. So seeing him and getting a early peek at his history was fun too.
Well, those two characters, much like Green Lantern and Flash, Green Lantern and Green Arrow, that's one of the pairings that DC has made use of so many times throughout the years, including the recent Morrison run. We saw that. So
yeah. And I would love an ongoing where it's just the two of them.
And I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, that's proven to be very viable over the decades. So it would never surprise me if we see another iteration of that.
Look, right now, Green Arrow doesn't have a book in publication, and there are so many Green Lanterns that you could use to partner with. Doesn't necessarily have to be Hal.
Right.
And it would be, depending on which one you use, it would obviously be a different dynamic, and it could prove interesting. So I hope that concept is revisited in a monthly.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. But yeah, so that's a look at two of the most important characters in Green Lantern's history,
So
in Sinestro and Guy Gardner.
what would you rate that issue? Because we didn't.
I will say, like I said, Guy showing up and saying I'm all healed after, it's an indeterminate period of time, but he's obviously all healed up. That's a little, I thought was a little overly convenient. So I would say around a 7.5, maybe. It wasn't the best, but I still liked the overall product and the fact that we saw that Guy was going to be a bigger part of the story going forward, because again, he vanishes and later on we learn where he went. And again, that's a story unto itself.
We'll have to read that issue at some point.
Yes, I know what happened. I know what happened, but we've also been going on for almost 2 hours. So
yeah, so definitely, I would agree with you 100%. 7.5 out of 10. But no, this was. Like I said, these are two important characters, and it was good to give them a spotlight at their early introductions, and we're going to continue that next month.
No doubt.
We've decided that we're going to spotlight John Stewart.
Spotlight, all right. Yes, the master builder himself.
Indeed, and look forward to going all in on the issue that we briefly touched on, and a couple more as well. Until then, Donnie, if people want to discuss or wax philosophically with you about the Green Lantern Corps, where can they do that? Online?
They can find me on Twitter as the Emerald Enthusiast. You'll see on a regular basis I put Green Lantern product reviews up, and any kind of questions that you would like for us to answer on the podcast here, go ahead and either hit up Adam or me, and we'll see if we can answer those questions for you. Until then, I'm going to recharge my ring and head back to Oa. Everyone stay safe, okay?
Right. And if you want to get in touch with me, as Donnie was referring to, you can do that at Adam_LeafsFan, or on Facebook. We have a group where you can request admittance into the group, the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network, and we will add you, and we'll continue the discussion there. Until next time, keep your rings charged and protect your sector. So long, everybody.